Alrighty.
All right.
Thank
Hello,
you everybody for
hello.
coming. Thank you. Awesome.
Hello.
Hello, it's us again, people.
Hello. Shout
Hello.
out to people on our website, ArtsXplore, on Facebook as well as on YouTube. Welcome to the second in the series of talks organized by ArtsXplore.
Yeah.
We are
Spang and Lei. So I'm Spang.
again.
Yeah, again. Must tell people in
Must
case
tell
people.
people,
Only
okay,
my
okay.
participants know, but
Okay,
we're on
okay.
Facebook Live,
Yeah.
we're on
Just
YouTube
to
Live.
Introduce to people.
And then this Lei.
This is Lei.
So
okay?
together we are Spang and Lei.
Spang and Lei.
So
Hi,
awesome.
hi.
Thank you so much for coming. I know it's Saturday, everyone's feeling lazy, it's okay. Shout out to Arts Week,
Yeah.
we are here now, and then we want to, listen to a really young and upcoming artist, Xue Mei.
Xue Mei is with us today.
Yes, Xue Mei is she's gonna be hello. I want to say hello to my participants first because I think it's important.
Hello.
Chloe, Xingyue, and all that.
Chloe,
Shout out,
Terrence.
kisses to everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
Hearts.
That's Spang.
That's Spang. That's
okay,
me.
Do again.
Never
Okay.
mind. I'm okay one. So
Okay.
shouting out to people like Tarifa, Wendy, Ryan again,
John,
Yorkshire, Tahira,
Tahira,
Celeste. And
Kajin.
yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of people. Just the names are just coming.
Junisha,
Yeah,
yes.
Junisha, and names that keep coming.
Yes.
So, without further ado, I want to introduce Xue Mei. Xue Mei is actually she's with the first time I got to know her was with Drama Box when
Yeah.
I was acting for a forum theatre piece. I wouldn't say more about that in case she wants to say more about forum
Yeah,
theatre.
don't go on.
Don't go on.
It's not your talk.
Yeah, it's not my talk.
Yeah.
It's Xue Mei's talk.
Yeah.
So the reason why we invited her is because she is she actually makes the idea of participation and participatory theatre as one of her core focuses. On how to do theatre making. And obviously we'll be asking her questions on that later. But most importantly, I think Xue Mei is a person that I didn't know her as an artist, like from a school, art design school or something like that. Which is like many of us, many of our participants here, we are not from art school, fine art school, or drama academy, or fine arts academy, performing arts. But the reason that sometimes we want to do art making is to make our issues, social issues, known, and we advocate for them.
Exactly.
And Xue Mei also is one person I feel that she's very socially conscious. She's actually one of the really socially conscious theatre persons that I know. She's very aware of the issues, current issues that's facing Singaporeans. So without further ado, I want to invite Xue Mei and to speak a little bit more about her practice and how participatory in and of itself affects that practice. Share. Thank you everybody.
Xue Mei.
We hand the floor out to her.
Hello everyone. Let me just share my slides. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you hear me? Hello everyone. Okay, so yes, like Spang mentioned, I am actually currently a resident artist with a theatre organization called Drama Box. The company has been around for quite a while. We just celebrated our 30th year last year. And as you can see on the slides, we are located in this shop house in Chinatown. And our works actually engage with people from diverse backgrounds and demographics through various art forms in different places and locations and for varying durations of time. So just to show some pictures of some of the works that we do at Drama Box to give you a sense. Over the years, right, so very briefly to introduce what we do in the company before I talk more about my practice and myself. Over the years, we have been kind of, come to call our practice or the work we do as socially engaged. So what that means is that we create spaces and conditions for people to be engaged with themselves, community, and also the larger society. So like some of the social issues that Spang talked about. And together we want to address these difficult issues using the arts, primarily through theatre performances, especially in the earlier years, but increasingly more involving also other forms like visual arts, photography, and design. And so right now you would see on the slide that I think the three key things that we really think a lot about at the moment when we do our work is actually creativity, criticality, and care. So how can we think differently and act differently from what the existing system is like? How can we do that, but also do it with care? Care not in the sense of being very careful or being afraid to talk about difficult things that may offend people, but care in the sense of being very sensitive and embracing of the difficulties, the complexities, and the vulnerabilities that are out there when we talk about these difficult social issues. So I would say these three things: creativity, criticality, and care are really some of the key things that we use to kind of guide our practice at the moment. And because of that, right, because of the different kinds of issues that we want to talk about, because of how I said we want to create spaces and conditions through the performances that we make, right, so that people can ask difficult questions or think about things that are around our lives. We realize that our works, right, increasingly it starts getting more and more participatory, which essentially means that the people who are involved in making the art are not just what we know as artists, right? Sometimes the audiences get involved. Sometimes people who don't see themselves and will never see themselves as art makers get involved in the creation of the performances or the artworks. Our works also get increasingly more and more multi and interdisciplinary. So we work with different art forms, work with artists from different disciplines, whether it's visual arts, photography, music, sound, dance. At the same time, right, we also start going beyond the arts circle, and it becomes intersectoral and also intercultural. So intersectoral in the sense that we also find ourselves working more and more with community workers, social workers, people who also share the same interest in the issues, whether they are activists, whether they are heritage enthusiasts, So these people come across these people in our works. The more we start to think about how we want to make our work. And finally, the intercultural, where intercultural not in the sense that it is a traditional culture, but rather more of, for example, I mentioned about how intersectoral the work is. So within the community workers, maybe there is one set of culture that they function within, and then within the arts, there's another set of culture that we work within. But then in working together on the projects that we do, in coming together to partner with one another, we actually are putting ourselves in this intercultural process where we have to actually understand. So it's not enough to just know ourselves and what we want to do, but then at the same time, we are also trying to understand who else is out there and what can we do together, which is why in a way, the talk is also looking at this whole idea of do things together, right? Do it together. So this is where a little bit of introduction into where Drama Box is at in terms of the kinds of work that we do and how we do it. And you can see here that there's also this, we also in a call and response model. So this call and response model, right, is actually very straightforward. Basically, there has to be a starting point for any project. So whatever project you want to do, you have an interest in a social issue or whether to tell a story of something that matters, starting point, there is a call, right? One possibility that we have encountered is where someone from a particular organization or someone who is really looking at the social issue makes a call out to us, the artists, and invites us to make, in this case, there is a social call, and then we have to generate an artistic or cultural response. The other scenario is sometimes the artists, ourselves being also very mighty, we also observe and we also live with these issues ourselves. And sometimes we initiate the call, we put forth an artistic call, and we invite the social and cultural response from other parties. So loosely speaking, it has been this kind of call and response process that we work with at Drama Box. Although recently I am more interested in looking at the term socially engaging versus socially engaged, because of how ongoing that word is, right? So to use engaging kind of captures the word engage in two ways. Number one is this act of engaging, this action to engage. And then secondly, the adjective part, which actually describes that, your work should be engaging. Your work has to be compelling in order to be impactful. So this is probably the most complex slide it's going to get for the entire talk. Okay, so it's not going to be so serious throughout, but I thought it gives a good idea of where we are at at Drama Box in terms of how we think about our work. So this is like the most complex already. Okay, so let's move on, right? And then you can get a little bit more personal where, okay, so within this Drama Box and how we work, right? I guess the reason why I've actually been at Drama Box since end of 2012. So it's close to 8 years, actually more than 8 years that I've been there. And even longer if I consider how I started off with their youth group. So like many of you here maybe, I also started off with an interest, in arts and social issue. And so I had the chance to join Drama Box to be part of their youth group, to do informal training, right? So it's not formally trained, but still somewhat trained in theatre, in performances, and how to use that to tell stories and talk about issues in society. So for myself, why I even start, what was that journey that brought me to today where I am looking at this thing called participation in theatre and performance? I would say there are probably three main things. So from the very earlier years, right? Just now Spang also mentioned how we got to know each other in a forum theatre performance. And I think in a lot of ways, forum theatre, it is kind of like my starting point to understanding this whole idea of injustice, or this whole idea of issues that actually need to be addressed, because there are all these inequalities or things that we have to deal with. So I think forum theatre is the starting point of that. And for those of you who are not familiar with forum theatre, right, it is essentially, you imagine you go to a theatre, usually when you watch a performance, the performance ends, the audience applause, and then maybe they take whatever reflections they have back with them, or to supper, and then they can talk about it with their friends if they want to, or they can forget about it. But forum theatre, essentially there are two parts. The first part, you still watch a play, but the play does not have any kind of resolution. And what happens is that in part two, you as the audience, right, you are invited to think about how you would do things differently if you can replace the characters, so that the overall situation that you've seen in the play can improve. So I think that is actually my very first encounter with this whole idea of participation. So the audience, not just staying as audience, but eventually taking a very active role in changing something that we all agree needs to be changed. And so I think for me, I feel like that is the seed and the spark of it all, right? And then subsequently, you would see that, then I started getting involved with some of the what we call community engagement projects, together with another colleague in Drama Box, Hui Ling. What we were doing was that we were going down to Bukit Ho Swee or Dakota Crescent, wherever we choose to work at. We were going down to these places, walking around, seeing who would be open to talk to us, right? Finding out about, the local community in that estate. And then through that, finding out their stories, understanding, what are some of the issues there, right? Then we create performances and also invite some of the residents, some of the people who maybe don't live there but work there to be part of the performance, to tell their own stories. So this is another, so in a way, if you look at how forum theatre is where the participation comes when the audience enters the theatre and watch the performance, right? Now then I started getting exposed to what would it be like if the everyday people, people who don't see themselves as performers or theatre makers, right, become part of the performance because it is their own story, and it's important that they tell their own stories wherever they are. So there is a little shift here where it lets me think about participation in another way. And in fact, it is also, you can also argue that it is maybe a deeper kind of participation coming from this residents, or who we call like community performers, because the amount of time it takes is very different. So in a forum theatre piece, the audience comes in, a little bit of warm-up preparation, and they come up and replace the characters, right? Whereas in this second kind of projects, the community engagement projects, usually it can take quite a bit of time, months of getting to know the people there, and then also getting their trust for them to be willing to say, I will be part of the performance. I'm okay to do that. And for them to say, I want to tell my story as well. So I think just purely by looking at the amount of time that it requires in the process, you can kind of tell participation in these two kinds of situation is quite different. And so these are two kinds of influences, right, on me in wanting to investigate about participation. And the third kind was actually when I attended a workshop in 2015, end of 2015, and I was introduced to, perhaps I would say, the visual arts side of participation. So for people who are interested to find out more, you can find out and check out this thing called Fluxus, Fluxus. It essentially is talking about how some of the artists in the 60s no longer want to keep art in museums or spaces that people say are for arts. So they want to break out of that, and they also then wanted to break out of what people expect or think about art. Right, so the fact that art is not unique to a sole group of artists, it is not something that only a small group of artists can do, but that everyday people can do. So I think that is the third important influence, because all these things, right, when accumulated in me, eventually they kind of made me question. So what is the kind of relationship that an audience can have from and with an artistic experience? So when you watch a theatre performance, when you go and watch any kind of artwork or see anything, right, how can we stretch, the possibilities that can come out from that experience, right? How can we create a situation where the audience is not only receiving, but that the audience is very much a part of the content of the work? So I think these questions then made me want to investigate this whole idea of participation and what it is. Because obviously, when I started finding out more, then I realized it is not, in a way, it's not a trend thing also. It has been around for quite a lot of years. It's part of art history for those who are interested to find out more about art history. But even if you're not interested to go deep into art history, right, I think the question really is arts really something that is specific and limited to a small group of people? How can arts help to open up conversations about issues that affect everyone? And if the issues affect everyone, then why can't everyone have a say in that artistic conversation or that process? So I think for me, that's where all these questions really get me started thinking about what possibilities can I create, what can theatre look like? Must theatre only be a performance that is for the audience, a script that is written and cannot be changed? So I think these are some questions that got me started. So that's a very long introduction. But if you follow the flow, you kind of get, okay, so when we talk about participation or participatory practices, it really is talking about, for me at least, I'm really thinking about what can we do together? We as in not just artists, not just we as in really everyone, right? Whoever is affected and interested and invested in any kind of issues that you want to change, what can we do together? So I think essentially that's why I kind of, put it as doing it together, is to me that sense of participatory practice. Yeah. So but I would kind of also want to to kind of illustrate that a bit. I think it's also then good to kind of talk a little bit about the process and what it looks like. So when we say, for example, in the earlier part, when I talked about how Drama Boxes works, my own interest in participation, right? How it is multidisciplinary, how it is intersectoral, right? I think to illustrate it using some examples would be helpful. So let me just share this. It's a work that I made together in collaboration with 3 other people. A playwright, Jin Tae, a sound designer, Darren, as well as lighting designer or lighting artist, Wan Wen. So the 3 of them together with me, we created this work called Flowers. Maybe we watch the video first and then I will talk more about it.
Bougainvillea, orchid, hibiscus, frangipani, dandelion. I stick flowers in your hair and you put grass in mine. And I protect you because I'm older and bigger and stronger than you. This is for you. If you ever find this, then at least you will know why I left. This was when it happened. She came into my bedroom one night, old enough now to understand. She told me what happened behind the locked door. But all I can think is, why? And that was when I knew I couldn't live here anymore. I didn't know that after I left, things got worse, not better. I didn't know how angry you were at me, how betrayed you felt. I thought she would protect you. She always protected you. I didn't know that you were afraid too. I didn't know the kind of hell they must have given you. How can one person be so strong to endure like that for so long? Growing up, there were times when I thought I was alone. But I forgot. You were always there too. Bougainvillea, orchid, hibiscus, frangipani, dandelion, butterfly pea, morning glory, Ixora.
Okay, so you can see that. Okay, I was waiting for it to play to the part to describe the project, so I don't have to explain. So basically, right? This project, Flowers, it is a response to look at the issue of patriarchy. Later, I'll talk a little bit more about how it started and from where it started. But generally, from the video, right, to give you a sense and a context also. The audience, 10 in one session, right, would get a Walkman and then they would play it and then you will hear. This is whatever you heard in the video just now is an edited version of the full-length piece that the audience will hear as they enter a house, a 2-story house, and they are free to roam around the house. It is set up such that it looks like any house that you would see around, but then along the way, it is the juxtaposition of what you hear and what you see that gives you some clues and traces of what had happened in this house before. So essentially, this piece was looking at domestic violence, but in a very, very subtle and nuanced way. There's no performance, by actors of any abuse scenes. There is no. In fact, you can even argue: is there even a performance in it? There was an actor who played the role of the father figure, but what he was doing was carrying on with his daily life. So in a way, it's also durational in the sense that we had the house for the whole day. There were slots throughout the day. So depending on which time you came as the audience, you would see different things that the character does. But the piece that you listen to would be the same. So to give you an idea, and hopefully the video helps you imagine a little bit, what this whole performance was like. How did the audience come in to watch the performance? So to kind of like share a little bit. So this is only one project that I've done, but there were a few others before, which I don't have time and probably won't go into details. That is also investigating this idea of participation. So throughout these different projects, and also with the earlier influences that I mentioned, right, from forum theatre, from how we work with communities in Bukit Ho Swee, Dakota, for me, I kind of realized that generally there is this process that I go through. So starting from the seed meaning there must be somewhere that I got the idea from. So for instance, for flowers, right, when I wanted to do a project, it was actually in response to sexual assault, in terms of I was trying to investigate, whenever I encounter news and whenever I encounter stories about sexual assault, there is always this intense feeling of, unjust, of anger, of a lot of things. And I was trying to understand that. So that is what I mean by seed, where you don't have to have a fully formed idea, but there is something that you want to find out more about and you want to address. So, and it's interesting that for me, this seed, right, is always not something that you can Google for. You can't Google, where your seed comes from. It's something that you have to listen and intuitively sense, in yourself. There's this thing that I always feel about something, and I want to find out more, right? Whether I want to find out about what I already know, what I want to know, or what I don't know yet, then, I go about to do it. And then with that seed, right, that's where then I start exploring to do what people know as, maybe sometimes the exploring can take the form of interviews. Maybe that's more familiar to a lot of us. We talk to people. We talk to people who we think would talk to us, but we also try to talk to people who we think we need to talk to, but we may not, necessarily want to talk to us. And I think throughout the process, you learn a lot about how to have conversations, especially when it's on a very difficult issue like that. So when I started off, it was, about encounters or people's stories, people who have stories or thoughts about sexual assault, about patriarchy, in general. The invitation was for them, whether they were comfortable to talk to me, as well as Jean, the playwright, to share what they went through, so that's to help us understand what exactly it is. And I think, so interviews is one kind of way you can actually explore deeper into certain things that you are interested to look at. Other ways, of course, more straightforward, I'm sure everyone does your secondary research, right? You go online, you go and read books, you go and find articles articles of different kinds, right? It can be stories, it can be also things that make you think deeper, probably something that is more academic in a sense, academic articles that can help you think deeper about the issue. I think at the same time, there are also things, right, that are not so text-based. So it's not so much of, must go and read, must go and talk to people. But then there are also things where you just have to maybe set yourself some exercises and then you go and do. So for this project, it didn't really happen. But for another project, what happened was that as part of the exploration, that project was about finding lost connection. So as part of the exploration, me with the collaborators, we came together and then we brainstormed ideas. We were saying that, okay, each one of you would lead an activity for the rest to do. So you tell other people what to, you give them a task, to do something. And that task has to be a creative task, right? It's not, for example, it's not like, find an article, but rather it's more like, okay, travel to the last place you remember you cried, that kind of thing. So weird or things that you may not know why you are even doing, or like, how is this useful to your project? But that's why I like to call it exploration. It's not so much research, it's exploration, because you're exploring, you're exploring using different senses. I think this is for me, I feel that this is maybe the one different thing about the artistic process, which is you don't just want to explore in words, but you want to explore in, with different senses, what you understand of this topic. And then then you can, for me, then I can get into conceptualizing, okay, so what essentially is this project going to be about? Why the exploration matters is because it helps you narrow and scope the actual question you're asking. So remember I said initially it started off with wanting to address sexual assault, but as I explored more, I heard the stories, I listened to it, and at the same time I was asking myself during conceptualization, so how to make a participatory work about sexual assault that is meaningful, that is more meaningful than more harmful. Right? I don't want to, this participatory is about audience needing to participate now. But how to do that? Again, going back to what I said about creativity, criticality, and care, right? How to do that without unnecessary harm? So I think that was something that I struggled a long time with, together with the collaborators. And eventually, I further unpacked, right, from all the exploration that I did. And I realized that maybe the bigger question that I really wanted to ask is, what exactly is this thing called patriarchy, and what does it cost all of us? So COST, right? And I think that's where, all the exploration helped me to funnel into that question. And from there, then, the design and the trial comes in. So the experience now is designed in a very different way. There is no requirement for the audience to participate by sharing their stories. That is actually is intentional. It's meant as a kind of protection, and also to give distance between the audience and the work. But at the same time, there is also a sense of being very deep in the experience of this other person's story, right? And so I think from there, after conceptualizing it, then you design the details of it in terms of, okay, so what exactly is it? Okay, we are going to do it in a 2-story house, through what, so for this work, it was a lot of spatial design, and also, the sound piece that you hear, and very subtly, the lighting conditions in the house, how to create the mood and the environment that we want to put the audience in, and all these things. And then finally, you have the performance. And for me, I think the performance as part of the process, right? Usually we think of the performance as the end of the project. But why in a sense, why do we even call it a practice? It's because it doesn't really end. The performance is more like a stage where you get to see the audience encounters the piece. The audience comes into contact with the questions that you were asking in your project, and then at some point it feeds back to you, and you have to unpack what you learn and unlearn about it. And then eventually it will flow back to the next seed, or it will flow back to your original seed, and then you will find another seed for another thing. So it's an ongoing process, so the arrow doesn't break. Yeah, so I think for me, from flowers and Rafi sharing about this process, I think there are a few questions here also in terms of understanding that for this program, a lot of you are also going to be working with people. You are collaborating in a group. Let's say for my case, right, the question of when does collaborators come in? When do we invite collaboration? I think I've learned that it really depends on what kind of collaboration you're looking for. So the collaborators can come in, once you have the seed, you can invite them in and then you explore together. But you have to be prepared that the exploration may not always lead to where you thought you would go. And I guess that's the challenge and beauty of collaboration, right? But at the same time, you also can decide that no, you want to only invite the collaboration in when it's when you have some kind of concept. That's also possible. And I've also tried that. So I think it's really how you want to collaborate with the people, and knowing that the earlier they come in, it means that there is more. Everyone has more say, and there is also then a higher likelihood that it goes to a different direction that you want, and that's perfectly fine because you're exploring the topic together. So this is in a way the process, and maybe just to show a little bit about how when I talked about how it really went, that exploration went to a lot of places before it came to the main question of what is the cost of patriarchy, right? And so this is kind of like just to show how difficult it was. And I think for flowers, maybe one thing also to mention, right, is that in thinking about participatory experiences or things that require the audience to access the performance in a different way, I think for flowers specifically, because of the difficulty of the issue, there was also thought given into having this other space outside the house. So this is what you can see here is that there is a table, where people can sit around, and then around it, right, there is a very simple, I won't even say it's an exhibition, but a very simple display of a timeline of the different milestones, right, in gender equality movement in Singapore. So you would see, for example, in 1984, a particular event happened, and so on and so forth. So it's a timeline, and at the same time, for the audience who wants to, after they finish their time in the house, they can come out. Actually, they can come out at any time, and they can come in, right, to come out and kind of like talk about what it was like for them. If they want to just sit there and be quiet, that's also okay. So I think there was this consideration given into this space here. So that is really more in depth, looking at flowers and its process. Looking at the time, maybe I'll just end with like the question, right? In terms of thinking about participatory practices, I guess for me it has always been, why and how is participation meaningful to the purpose of the work? So not all projects, I feel, can be made in a participatory way. If you can't find a way yet, then don't do it. And I think the other big question actually is to consider this question within the context of the times that we live in, right? So from last year, actually participation, we always imagine the audience having to be there, having to be physically present, either by themselves or with one another. But now, where we are with COVID, how can that happen across the physical distance? How can it still be meaningful, critical, creative? So I think these are some of the bigger questions that come in as we talk about participatory practice. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about the overrun. I tried my best.
No, please don't.
Feel
It's really good talk.
It's really good. We wanted to go on, but
Yeah,
we just have
it's just that time.
Time is something that we have to keep in mind. But having said that, we can always continue the conversation
On Q&A.
on Q&A, and then
Which is
also, I mean, Xue Mei, I'm sure you can contact her after this, but we're not going to end it yet. But I think we're going to go into Q&A. If
I have a question before anyone asks a question. Please use the chat function, people. Have no shy. Use the chat function.
For people on YouTube and Facebook, you can actually leave your comments there, and then we can reiterate the questions to Xue Mei.
No problem. The question is, I want to start. You wanted to end with that question. I wanted to start with that question. Your slide was how and why.
Yeah.
You know, the use of participatory in performance. Why do we want to use it? And then the reason is why? Yeah. Is there a need to do that? And what do you think? I mean, I know your work does lah, but the why is important sometimes, right?
So for me, for me, my experience with it was I appreciated, as an audience myself, I appreciated how certain kinds of participation has a sense of liberation. So I mentioned earlier when I attended the workshop in Hong Kong, actually it's true that because I was a participant in the workshop, and then we were given the space, we were kind of like experiencing one of the artworks that the artists made. And then throughout, the artwork is about the artwork is basically, there's one part of the work where we had to go out on the streets and then find someone that we never consider as part of our circle, or like we never would imagine talking to, and talk to that person, right? So it's a very simple thing. And then I think through that experience for me, I remember the feeling, which is a feeling of liberation, that there is something that I can decide to do or not to do, but at the same time, whatever I decide on, it made me think a lot about why I made that decision. And then that connects back to my earlier experience with forum theatre, where, as audience, we come up and replace characters, right?
Yes.
Then we change things, but with everything that we change, we are always asking ourselves, why would we think like that? Why did we choose to do things this way?
Yep.
So I kind of feel like that process for me is very meaningful. That my relationship, with this arts experience is no longer just about watching a story or watching a story and then maybe feeling connected to the story. That is important, but at the same time, I think in that same experience, if I can also have the chance to, try and understand and unpack why we do certain things certain ways, then I think for me that's a very interesting kind of feeling to have in the experience. So I wanted to put that in the works. And I feel like, there are people who talk about things like giving people agency, through participatory works. But right now I'm not very sure about that word, so I try that's why I never talk about it at all in the
I was a bit shocked.
For people who want to, who are interested, you can go and Google participatory arts agency, it will come out. Basically it just means seeing people as agents of change, right? And who has control and over your choice and decision. I think for me it's really just about finding different ways to allow people to not be worn out by life. Right?
I'm going to quote you next time. Finding ways to let people not be worn out by life.
Okay. It's a very recent thing, because I also realized that there are participatory experiences where I feel exhausted to participate. So as an audience, right? So I think, but that's when I am a participant, right? But then conversely, right, I would ask myself, am I making also, things that would exhaust people in asking for their participation? And if so, why are people exhausted to participate? And I think maybe that's especially also maybe it came about from last year, with COVID and all the online things, right? And then when we did some programs online, then I realized there's this exhaustion in participation. So I wanted to find out why. And so is there a chance that this agency that we say is so great, right, can actually be exhausted? No? Okay. And I think that's, it's a question. But I hope I answered your question.
You did. absolutely. Very, very detailedly well answered. I'm going to throw the floor open to the participants. Please, participants, ask away. Xue Mei's work is really quite linked to, what we're trying to do here. DWAR, open source, stories from other people, issues from other people. Yeah. And I think one thing, something that she wrote just now, states just now, which I wrote down, which is seed lah. Something that might not be fully formed, but something you intuitive know that you want to address as a art maker or change maker lah. So any questions and please
you can type
unmute yourselves and just go for it, people.
Yep.
Yeah, just give some time to think about it. Oh, very very silent our group today. Our group is
It's a different form of participation.
It's a different form of participation.
Observant as participation.
Observation as participation.
Observation as participation.
Yeah. Any thoughts, people? A lot of people here.
Yeah,
I know.
people.
Quite a lot of people. Okay. So then I will continue to ask Xue Mei things.
Yeah.
Because
I
her
have a
work
question
is.
also
Oh, your
to tell.
question. You want to ask first?
I think also the question about at which point, okay, maybe we have a question. Maybe we answer Marianne's question
first.
Marianne's, when you get your participants to express or recount their assault and abuse, is it through friends or relatives? Relatives or friends?
Okay, no, so this, right, when we did the interviews, so there were a few things that are important. So number one is that when we did the interviews, right, we were already clear how the interviews will be used. Because, so that's one thing, okay. So, for example, maybe, I don't know whether you all have seen performances where the interviewee's content is used word for word. So that's what we call verbatim theatre.
Yep.
When you are quoted word for word, and the theatre performance is really about the different stories, from different people. In this case, it definitely wasn't that. And we were clear that, the interviews, whatever interviews that we did with people were for our own reference, to help us understand the complexities of it. Because none of us, in a way, we all have different ways we relate to the topic, but none of us had direct experience. So we have to find a way where we can understand it, yet, it's not understanding it from a sympathy position, right? Or like, I've not experienced it and I feel for you. But more like we understand it and we feel as strongly about it. So I think that is one thing. And more specifically to your question, so in that context, right, understanding the sensitivity and the fragility of, or the vulnerability of it, right? It was important then to create a space where it's just me, the playwright, and the interviewee. For this, we started with a lot of them are people that are around us, right? Not necessarily total strangers. The other thing I forgot to mention, which is quite important, is working with partners. So we, besides interviewing people that we know, we also actually went to organizations like AWARE, and then also organizations like PAVE. PAVE is a Center for Prevention of Violence
Against Women.
Yeah, so we went to interview these organizations, and through the social workers who worked directly with these people, then we kind of get a sense of, they kind of told us, a sense of what are some of the things to think about, what are some of the things that are the key things, right, to consider when talking about domestic violence or talking about patriarchy in general. So there were also these partners that we go to for stories, for their take on the issue, as well as also for resources. So not just for the stories, but subsequently, just now in the space that I mentioned that was outside the house, there was also materials that we got from AWARE that we kind of put out there for people who are interested to look at if they need. So these are little things. Personally, I'm not entirely satisfied that, I actually right now it's also a good time to reflect on this project, because I'm also asking myself, especially with mental wellness or mental health being a topic, right? Also for this program, I think the question of how to talk about these issues using the arts, but in a way that is not just about trigger warnings or call this number, if you need. So I think for me, I'm thinking, okay, how to create the space for people to experience artworks that is about these topics, yet making it a space that is a healthy, caring space, and not somewhere where it's triggering. But it's a difficult question, and I'm still thinking about it also.
Okay, we have quite a few questions. Thank you, Xue Mei, for
I think that's a very sensitive answer, actually. That you always put care for others as one important part of the artwork. Because sometimes as we deal with socially conscious issues, social issues, it's very easy to not care about what you're putting out there also. So the second question is from Tahira. I think that's a very awesome question, Tahira. How can such participatory performances be expanded outside of the realm of theatre and towards other kind of performing arts? Example, i.e. dance, music, etc., etc.
Okay, the short answer is, right, my influence fluxes, right, it started from music. As in the person who started...
I never knew.
Not so much that, but more like, okay, so there's this thing, I mean, Tahira, if you're interested, you can go and look up things like performance scores, right? But
yes,
the whole, and John Cage, so Absolutely. The whole idea that, actually the whole idea, the word score is borrowed from the music side,
of course,
right? That instead of, in traditionally, you have a score that is written by a composer. So same thing in theatre, you have a script that's written by a playwright, right? And then the actor performs, word by word to it. The musician performs note by note. It's all told to you how to perform. But if you look up Fluxus performance workbook, there are examples of performance scores that people have written, and it's meant to be interpreted and performed however you like.
Yeah.
So, for example, okay, this is the only one I remember because it's the shortest score I've ever seen. Yeah. It's a one-word score, and the only word on the score is exit. So for example, how to apply it to dance? Okay, let's say you give this score to a dancer. Okay, dancer A, B, C, D, right? They will interpret this in a different way. How to perform exit? But this is a very simplistic example to answer your question. I think. Another kind of participation I wanted to bring up, which I didn't have time to, right? So far in the examples that I've shared, it's really more of, during the performance, the audience, instead of just watching something, they take part in something, right, during the actual performance. But another very important thing that we do a lot at Drama Box is also that the participation doesn't just appear in the performance, it comes in already during the process, especially when we work with a lot of non-performers. So, for example, when we worked with residents in Dakota Crescent, because if you know Dakota Crescent, it was It was scheduled for redevelopment a few years back, and then there were residents there, elderly and whatever, not who have been staying there for a long time, and also this seniors activity center manager who has been there working with the community there for a long time. So what does this location do to them, right? And so during that process, we were trying to know them better, and also trying to invite some of them to be part of the performance so that they can tell the audience, or they can tell people their own stories and experiences of living in Dakota Crescent. So during that process, right, the work with these community performers itself, right, is a kind of participation. The participation comes from them, right, during that process. And it spans across a longer period of time. The relationship you form with these participants are also stronger and deeper because of the amount of time that you have to work with them. So I think in terms of dance, music, I'm sure in the local scene, there are companies who work with different communities using these forms, right, to invite their participation. Yeah, so I'm sure
Angela Leong lah.
Arts Vision, is it?
Arts Vision, Angela Leong actually does
quite a lot of that community work.
Yeah, community.
And
okay, thank you,
thank
Xue
you.
Mei.
That was a good question. Yeah.
Moving on to Chloe's question.
How do you zone in on a social issue without being overly,
Overly
specific? That's my point.
Yeah,
Sometimes I
yeah.
get a bit
Basically, the nuance. Yeah.
for
I
you
think,
lah.
okay, clarify a bit. What's the fear about being overly specific?
Maybe Chloe.
Chloe can answer
Chloe
that.
can answer.
Is there a fear about
Or
being
what's the
overly
concern with being
Is there a
overly
concern you think?
specific?
Yeah, one of my biggest fears of being overly specific is that I may miss out on other people who perhaps like face a similar issue, but then they have like, you know, an additional set of experiences that may make that specific issue like far worse for them or not as applicable to them as I would think. And so in including them, they may feel a little bit out of place, perhaps.
We can contextualize it. Chloe, can I ask you for
Yeah.
permission to contextualize this part? So for example, is it when we talk about mental well-being,
Well-being.
so even in the spectrum of mental
I
wellness,
think it's a very broad.
it's a very broad spectrum. So how
yeah,
do you,
term.
maybe for Xue Mei, it's like, maybe in the issue of social issue of mental wellness, correct me if I'm wrong, Chloe, is that how do we not that there's a fear, but how do we, if we are too specific, then the people get left out, or if we are specific ourselves, then people, when they are
Yeah.
included, they are like, hey, I don't know why you include me, that kind
Or
of thing.
basically, if you're being too specific, does it rule out the perspective of another
The person, yeah, that might be
who may
what-
be affected by this?
Yeah. What do you think, Chloe?
maybe-
Is there something
Is that what you are trying
is along these
to
lines?
Yeah, it
clarify,
was more
Chloe?
of the latter, sorry.
The perspective of someone.
Yeah. How do you include, or how do you choose even? Yeah,
Xue Mei, how do you choose?
Yeah,
I think
whose perspective?
I'm so sorry. No, because earlier on you said that you would interview people. Like, how do you choose who to interview, or do
that's
you
a good
just
question.
make it like an open call?
Okay.
Whose
Maybe I'll
story do you
answer
tell?
the interview bit in the sense that because at the time it was at the exploration phase, right? So there isn't, it's really more of open to whoever is comfortable to share their experiences. And in fact, it is from that wide variety of experiences. So actually what we did learn, is that we think that when you talk about things like sexual assault or patriarchy or violence, right? Violence against, or maybe violence, right? That is only talking about a few things. But then when we talk to these people, we uncover from their stories, there is something else that we didn't think about. And then that links me to the other thing I wanted to say in response to your question is that I think number one is to not confuse the thing about, number one, being general does not equal to being universal. So being specific does not make it ununiversal. Being something specific can still relate because it is universal. So for example, I think, okay, so for example, like in Flowers, right, it was a very specific story. There are specific characters, and there has to be, because otherwise you cannot write a good story. You are only going to write something that stays at a certain shallow or surface level, because you have to imagine characters, and characters have to be specific. But what these specific characters can bring up can be universal feelings of fear. Maybe their response to fear, could be specifically very different, right? Maybe this one hide in the cupboard, that one pluck flower, But that fear is something that we can all relate to.
Yep.
And we know how we respond to it. Which actually is connected to why sometimes I feel that participation is very powerful, because it allows for that subjectivity to come in. So for example, in another work that is about lost connection, that one I feel is actually more participatory, right? Where the work cannot happen. There's no work if the participants don't come with anything. So the marketing of that work, so the work is called Missing. And the marketing of that work, right, is essentially, do you have a lost connection you want to revisit? If you have, then you come. Right? So, and when you come, right, the participants are told to, eventually they have to go to a place where they want to reconnect with this connection. And how would I know where they're going to go? I can't
Wow.
know that, right? So in a sense, if you can, so to use that as an example, right? They have a very specific place that they will go to. They have a very specific association to this lost connection. But then to allow for that specificity to come out, right? It doesn't mean that it cannot be something that everyone can do. So it's about how you frame the question so that it is general or universal enough, but people can come in with their specific answers, and yet they still relate to this whole thing about lost connection, which is why it's very difficult. Which is why for flowers, I didn't even try because of the time and everything. Right? I didn't even try to find the right frame to make it more participatory. But instead, we just went with what we feel would be something that we are confident to do because of also of the issue. But okay, hopefully I answer your question. But I think there's nothing wrong with. There's everything to applaud about being specific, but I think you need to know being specific what. So again, goes back to what is your central question of the piece.
Okay.
I guess.
Thank you, Chloe.
Chloe, that was a good question because that was a quite difficult question actually. That Spang and Liz also struggle with. Okay, the next question Celeste want to ask is just curious, Xue Mei, do you think that through participation, for instance, theatre, it opens up the medium to more people?
Do you mean like whether people become more interested in theatre because of the fact that they can participate?
I think you can. Celeste, you want to answer that? Follow up with a like a clarification. Celeste paiseh already.
I mean, if I understand your question correctly.
I think it is that, like, do you think that through participation, for instance, theatre, it opens up theatre to more people? When people can make choices and participate in the artwork, do you rope in and co-opt more people into your form,
the
your medium
itself?
Yeah.
I think it depends. Like I said, some people find participation entirely exhausting. And they have already spent a long day in school, at work, and they don't want to be asked to think and make choices. But I think, which is why I think it is also a craft in terms of how you make that participation. And then that depends on who you want to reach. So, for instance, right, I would say something like the work that I described just now, missing about the lost connection, right? The way it was being done, right, would never work with the uncle auntie audience that we are used to seeing when we go to Heartlands to perform. Right. And it's not because of any. No, it's not that because it's too chim for them, or chim as in too profound for them. There's nothing. It's not about that level of
understanding.
It's really more about you understanding who you are addressing and talking to, and then finding a way to engage them. So, which is why I said, like, when we talk about drama box, to me, I feel like socially engaging, right? It has to engage, and it has to be engaging. Like, people have to want to be, and the performance have to be interesting. So, whoever your target audience is, right? Same thing, let's say if you want to bring some of your topics, if you are working with young people, you are younger than me, I'm sure, even though I cannot see your faces, but right, like working with young people, if you work with young people, right, like maybe not certain things won't work with young people purely because it's too boring or it doesn't engage them enough. So I think it is about knowing who your audience is and then designing the right kind of performance for them. Sometimes, right, so which is why sometimes I also feel that it doesn't have to be participatory in a very complicated way. The thing I really like about forum theatre is that it's very simple, right? You watch a play, but you cannot sit there and relax. You think about who you want to replace to make a change, right? It's very simple, but it's also very challenging, and you can unpack a lot of very complex, difficult issues. And it's something that everybody can do because it is me being someone else and doing something, right? As in, if I have an idea, I think this person can do this, I just try. So I think there are different ways in which you can do that depending on who your audience is.
Also, I would like to point out that there is no right or wrong lah in participation. I feel it's always like people always ask me, am I participating in the right way? Am I interacting in the right way? So I always want to answer, actually there is no right or wrong way to interact, you know. I mean, yes, for safety sakes, obviously when we deal with electronics, you don't go and take the sensor and shake it, you know, that kind of thing. But then that is my duty to make sure that you don't do that, right? So maybe that could be also a way to think about it. And I mean, for time's sake, we have to move on to the next question. So just to point out, Marianne was pointing out, when you mentioned how the flux performance, right, and how the participants are involved in the theatrical experience in and of itself, it reminds Marianne's just right here, her video is actually on, which is awesome. Reminds me of the controversial performance Rite of Spring. So I had to do a little bit of what Rite of Spring is. For Rite of Spring, people who don't know can obviously Google it, but it's Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, and the reason why it was controversial during that time, I think it was a Paris haute couture, bourgeoisie kind of performance. There was a riot after that because they were very offended as how dare Stravinsky actually go against what music was that time, or popularly conceived notions of what music was, because Rite of Spring was a lot of screeching, a lot of, you know, the violin go boing like that, and then they found that was noise, and now we accept it, you know, sometimes even noise is part of the music, or silence is part of the sound, that kind of thing, right? But at that time, I think it caused the riot lah. So I guess that's what she was trying to say. So she asked also, why did you choose Dakota for the performance? Is it because you want to tutup already? They want to close down, then you're very scared that you know, if you don't go in,
collect.
hurry up, collect, or uncle auntie stories, that kind of thing.
Is it the kind of like...
Yeah, that
actually
kind of
it was even earlier than that. Actually, Hui Ling and I, we kind of had the same, or rather we talked about it. Because, okay, the context is that the National Arts Council is very near Dakota Crescent. So even way before that, you know, many years ago, right, when you go to the National Arts Council, you'll walk past it.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, remember I said, right, the whole thing about using your different senses, right, to tell you things. So same thing, right? We actually felt that the neighborhood is very unique. When you're in there, right, when you're in the estate, right, it's very different from any other places.
Yes,
so we thought it was interesting as a site. So the other thing that we do a lot is site-specific theatre. So theatre that happens at specific places and is about the specific stories in that place. And so we had wanted to do it already back in 2013. But at the time when we were talking to a collaborator, the playwright, she wanted to write about Bukit Ho Swee because of the whole history of the fire and everything.
Right. Okay.
And so we thought, okay, we can do Bukit Ho Swee first, and then we will do Dakota Crescent. So, well, as things stood, once we finished Bukit Ho Swee, the announcement came that, okay, Dakota Crescents are asked to move out. Then we think, okay, then that's a sign that we have to do it already. And then we have to do it. So that was in a way how it came about. But actually, interestingly, right, at that point when the announcement came out, we also had a question. So now that the announcement is out, right, there are so many people who are looking at it, paying attention to it. Do we still do it or not? Is there still a point to do it or not? Which then reminds me, actually, for Flowers, there was a similar question. There was a period of time, I don't know why, but maybe because of the Me Too movement, there were quite a few local plays also looking at sexual assault.
Yes, of course.
Or, you know, looking at this issue.
Yep.
And there was a time when I was asking myself, while thinking about whether this project is still about sexual assault, I was asking the question of, okay, what else about sexual assault is not being addressed that I can address with this project, that we can address with this project? So I think that is another question that probably would be interesting to consider when you are working on, you know, different issues. Especially like I know mental wellness is really the issue that a lot of people are paying attention to. So I think an important question is really, what are you saying or asking that no one else is already asking about?
Wow,
That's
a good one. Good pro tip. They call it.
Asking question very easy. The answer is more difficult.
Asking question very
easy. Good luck, everybody.
Okay, so we have a last question here.
From
it says from
Terrence.
Terrence. Terrence also here. Terrence wave a bit to me, and I'll wave back to Terrence.
Hello, Terrence.
It says, "Hey Xue Mei, amazing content. Like to ask if you have any tips Okay, to maintain staying true to the message. How do you maintain staying true to this message of yours and the delivery of this message through different mediums during the collaborative process? This is a very well thought of answer. Because it's
Question.
well thought of question.
Yeah,
Three
yeah.
parts, ma.
Yeah.
Maintain staying true to your message, and then you have delivery of the message, right? And then you have different mediums, and might dilute, ma.
Yeah.
He's scared.
And you are working with
Collaborators.
many different collaborators.
Sorry, can I interject with the mic?
Yes, please go for it.
please.
Okay. Xue Mei, thank you so much for your content. I love it. My question is, because we are working with multiple people with different backgrounds, and everybody has their own individual or distinct idea of what they want to create. But at the same time, the overarching theme and the message cannot be, in a way, muddled or diluted. And in that case, how do we stay on track with everyone's different ideals in mind? How do we stay on track while putting what we want to do and making it something that is in equal parts everybody's efforts?
I think this question has two parts. One is about staying true to the message, right? The other part is actually about how to collaborate. So, I answer the how to collaborate part first. Number one is, if you had the choice, then you would know. You would actually, in a scenario where you have a choice, right? There is a reason why you choose these people to collaborate with. So that you must always remember, and everybody complement one another in different ways. In a scenario where you don't have a choice, then you have to discover, which is fun because then you have to discover, why are you with this person or this group of people, and how can what are your different sensitivities that allow you all to come together? But I think the other thing that we have to debunk about collaboration is that everyone must agree or everyone must be happy. Maybe. I mean, I'm still learning and I have to learn that, that collaboration is really about, which is why, then it's related to your other question about the message, right?
Yes.
In order to stay true to the message, the group must agree on what the message is, and the message must be specific enough. It cannot be too broad. So for example, if flowers was about patriarchy, sure, you can do everything and anything, but it doesn't help. So as difficult, and this is I find this is the most difficult part of the entire process, is coming up with the central question your piece is about. It took me months to settle on what is the cause of patriarchy on everyone as the central question.
Wow.
In a family context, right? As a central question. Number one is, you must be rigorous. You must hang in there until you come up with that question.
Wow.
Then that will help your group a lot, because subsequently, whatever decisions you make, can we put a light here? Can we do a brochure? Can we, design this, design that? It comes back to, does it respond to the question? That's one. The other thing I feel is sometimes having a question alone maybe is not enough, because we can all interpret the question in very different ways. Sometimes it helps, right? If your limitations are actually good when it's collaborative. You all need to set each other parameters, right? For example, for flowers, actually we didn't have the idea before we had the house. It's more of, we had the house, we can go to this place, right? We can rent it, it's within budget, and got feel, I think can do something there. We had the house, and then we have to think, what to do with the house. So in a way, it's an accidental parameter, which is actually helpful. Because again, what is the cost of patriarchy on everyone in a family context can also produce 10 ideas. And how do I then choose? Or how does your group choose? So sometimes I think you all can set yourselves parameters. Another way, which is also something, I guess, but I think all these things, right? I think ultimately the thing is, artistic processes, right, give you the license to try and have fun. So you do weird things and then you come back and evaluate, that one doesn't really work. But
I think this is important.
So sometimes, because sometimes you really do get stuck, right? Let's say you get stuck, you cannot come up with the question, then how, right? It doesn't mean that you don't do anything. It just means that, friends, we don't have the question, but based on whatever we know about the topic, whether it's mental wellness, whether it's working with people with different abilities, can we think of, and can we just brainstorm ideas and then we go and test out? It can be bite-sized ideas like that. and then you test, and you realize, okay, maybe there is something from this idea. Then you work backwards. Why is it there is something from this idea, right? Like, why did we feel that this thing works? And then you work backwards, and then sometimes you find a question like that. Or you do something and you find that, well, it really doesn't work. Why does it really not work? It's not what we want to say. Why not? And then you work backwards again, and then you will find, oh, actually, what I want to say is this.
Yep.
So these are some experiences I had. I'm sure you all both also have a lot, right?
We
How to
We'll share that with them lah.
Another time.
Yes.
For sure.
Okay.
You too.
Wow.
Thank you so much for hanging in there, everyone.
Really, thank you,
Xue Mei.
Xue Mei, for
Thank
answering
you.
all the questions.
Thank
and
you,
then-
participants.
Thank you, participants.
Shout out, thank you
yes.
for coming in.
Yes.
Yeah. And really, we want to say thank you to everyone for actually participating
Yeah.
and being here, even by sheer presence.
Yep.
I think that is very important. Even though it was, Xue Mei answering questions, us asking questions, but even those who are silently listening, I think that you would actually gain something or glean something from this process lah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Xue Mei just shared
Yeah.
in the chat, which we will announce this, put this in our studio,
Yeah.
incubation studio as
Yep.
well, and we will share this with everyone. If you want to contact Xue Mei, and then if you want to link up with her
Yep.
to talk about her participatory
Yeah.
theatre processes, yes, there's her contact, Xue Mei at
dramabox.org.
dramabox.org. Okay, thank you everyone. We've come to the end of.
We can't keep you any
We cannot
longer.
keep you any longer.
Feel bad. Thank
And
you
then,
so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tarifa. Thank you as
Tarifa.
well.
And then we will keep in touch via the studio, and then we'll see you next week, participants. And
Thanks,
thank you.
Marianne. I need to speak to Sam Chong though.
Samantha, can
Samantha.
you hang around for
Yeah,
a while?
just for a little
we just
short
want
while.
to chit chat with you for a while.
Yeah,
Yes.
because we're not
Thank
here
you,
this morning.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you to those who are watching us on Facebook and YouTube.
Yep.
We hope to see you for our next session. Our next session will be on the 20th of February, and then it will be with Yurik Lau, and then there will be more announcement made on our website. So
Yep.
our website piece is here. Let me see. This
Yes.
one. Yes, this is us. Okay, so follow us on our IG and our Facebook, spang.lay. Or you go to our website to find out more about the upcoming events. But thank you so much, Xue Mei, and thank you, participants.
Thank you for coming in, people. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Gaucha.
Thank you,
you,
Marianne.
Cody. Thank you, Kai Jin. Thank you,
Terrence.
Tarifa, Wei Jin, Wendy.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao, people.
Cody,
Domo arigato.
Junisha,
Thank you,
Rongshen.
Terrence. Thank you, Marianne.
Xingyue.
Wow,
Thank you.
thanks for coming.
Thanks for
I
coming
can go,
in.
right?
Huh?
No,
I can go.
Up to you. You cannot go. Later first.
Okay.
So, Sam, you want to breakout room with Sam?
Yeah. So
Just have to tell her
Okay. So
while I stay in
maybe
this part.
Tracy can. Yeah, we can end the session for today. Thank you so much.
But
end the stream.
stream,
Don't end the
session.
Zoom. Yeah, end the stream. Thank you.